The observation deck of the Galactic Research Station Kepler-7 hummed with nervous energy as Dr. Zixara adjusted her spectral analyzer for the third time in 10 minutes. The insectoid scientist's compound eyes tracked every movement on the forest moon below, where humanity's first diplomatic contact was scheduled to take place in less than an hour. "Sensors are picking up the human vessel," announced Commander Tholvek from his position at the central console. The reptilian officer's scales shifted to a deeper blue, indicating his heightened stress levels. "They're landing approximately 2 kilometers from our designated meeting point." Ambassador Veltar, the station's senior diplomatic representative, folded her forearms across her chest. Her crystalline form caught the light from the viewing ports, creating prismatic patterns on the deck. "According to our intelligence, humans are considered one of the more unpredictable species in this sector. Their psychological profiles suggest extreme emotional volatility and an alarming tendency toward violence." Dr. Zixara's antennae twitched with concern. The preliminary reports from the Confederation scouts were quite disturbing. They mentioned something about humans keeping dangerous predatory species as companions. The very concept defies all known evolutionary logic. Through the massive transparent aluminum windows, they watched as a sleek human shuttle descended through the moon's atmosphere. The craft moved with surprising grace, its pilot demonstrating remarkable skill as they navigated between the towering crystal formations that jutted from the forest canopy like frozen lightning. "Their technology appears more advanced than our initial assessment suggested," Tholvek observed, his translator working to convert his native hisses and clicks into standard galactic. "That vessel is using propulsion systems we haven't seen before." The shuttle touched down in a clearing beside a crystalline lake that reflected the pale blue light of the system's twin suns. Steam rose from the water's surface, creating an ethereal mist that drifted between the strange, bioluminescent trees. This moon had been chosen specifically for first contact due to its neutral environment and lack of aggressive wildlife. As the assembled alien dignitaries watched, the shuttle's boarding ramp lowered with a soft hiss. A single figure emerged, and even from their elevated position they could see this was unmistakably human. The being walked upright on 2 legs, had the proper number of limbs, and wore what appeared to be a simple environmental suit rather than heavy combat armor. "Preliminary scans indicate the human is unarmed," Dr. Zixara reported, though her voice carried notes of uncertainty. "However, our databases suggest humans can be dangerous even without conventional weapons." The human began walking toward the agreed-upon meeting coordinates, moving through the alien forest with confident steps. What caught everyone's attention, however, was what followed behind him. A massive shadow emerged from the shuttle, and Ambassador Veltar's crystalline form darkened with shock. "By the ancient lights," she whispered. "What is that creature?" The being that padded silently behind the human stood nearly as tall as the alien himself, with a sleek, muscular form covered in midnight black fur, marked with silver streaks. Its eyes glowed with an inner fire, and when it opened its mouth to taste the air, they could see teeth designed for tearing flesh. The creature moved with the fluid grace of a born predator, every step calculated and purposeful. Scanning now, Dr. Zixara's manipulator appendages danced across her instruments. The creature registers as an apex predator, possibly from Earth's northern regions. Muscle density suggests incredible strength, and those claws, they could tear through most known metals. Commander Tholvek's scales had shifted to pale yellow, a clear sign of fear. Why would the humans bring such a dangerous beast to a diplomatic meeting? Are they trying to intimidate us? As they watched, something extraordinary happened. The human stopped walking and turned to address his companion. Even without audio enhancement, they could see him gesture toward a fallen log, and the massive predator immediately moved to investigate. What followed defied every assumption they had made about the relationship between the two beings. The predator approached the log cautiously, then began to whine, a sound that carried even to their observation post. The human immediately rushed to the creature's side, kneeling beside it with obvious concern. He gently examined one of the beast's massive paws, and the aliens could see something glinting between the thick pads. "The predator appears to be injured," Dr. Zixara reported, her voice filled with confusion. But the human's response, "This is not the behavior of a master toward a weapon or tool." They watched in stunned silence as the human carefully extracted what appeared to be a sharp crystal shard from his companion's paw. The massive predator held perfectly still during the procedure, despite what must have been considerable pain. When the human finished, he produced a small medical kit from his pack and began treating the wound with the same care they might show to an injured colleague. The predator, this apex killing machine, nuzzled against the human's shoulder in what could only be described as affectionate gratitude. The human responded by scratching behind the creature's ears, eliciting what sounded remarkably like a purr of contentment. "This changes everything we thought we knew about human psychology," Ambassador Veltar said, her form shifting to brighter hues that indicated deep thought. "That creature could easily kill the human in seconds, yet it trusts him completely, and the human shows no fear whatsoever. Look at the way they interact," Dr. Zixara added, adjusting her instruments to focus more closely. "There's clear communication happening between them, but it's not based on dominance or control. It appears to be mutual respect." Commander Tholvek leaned forward, his earlier fear replaced by fascination. "In all our studies of interspecies relationships, we've never encountered anything like this. Predators and prey species might coexist, but this level of trust between beings of such different capabilities." The human and his companion had resumed their journey toward the meeting point, but now the dynamic was completely different from what the observers had initially perceived. The predator walked alongside the human as an equal, occasionally ranging ahead to investigate interesting scents before returning to his side. When they crossed a small stream, the human actually used the creature's back for balance, and the massive beast adjusted his position to make the crossing easier. "They're not master and weapon," Ambassador Veltar realized, her crystalline form now glowing with excitement. "They're partners, companions, perhaps even friends." As the unlikely pair drew closer to the designated meeting area, each of the alien observers found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about humanity and their place in the galaxy. Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped into the designated meeting area, her breath forming small clouds in the cool air of the alien moon. Beside her, Shadow's massive form moved, with the quiet confidence that had made him legendary among the exploration teams back on Earth. The wolf hybrids' enhanced genetics had been designed for exactly this kind of mission: intelligence, loyalty, and the ability to sense danger that human technology couldn't detect. "Easy, boy," Elena murmured, noticing how Shadow's ears had perked forward. His enhanced senses were picking up something her instruments hadn't registered yet. "I know they're watching us. Probably have been since we landed." She had volunteered for this assignment despite the risks. First contact missions were dangerous enough without bringing a companion that most species would classify as a lethal weapon. But Shadow wasn't just any companion. He was her partner, trained from birth to work alongside humans in the most challenging environments the galaxy could offer. The crystalline formations around the meeting site created natural acoustic chambers, and Elena could hear the faint hum of advanced technology from somewhere above. She smiled slightly, knowing their observers were probably analyzing every movement, trying to understand the relationship between her and Shadow. "What do you think, Shadow? Should we give them a proper introduction?" The massive wolf hybrid turned his golden eyes toward her, and she could see the intelligence there that had made their partnership so successful. Shadow had been genetically enhanced not just for size and strength, but for cognitive ability that approached human levels in some areas. He understood far more than most people realized. Elena settled herself on a smooth crystal formation that served as a natural bench, and Shadow immediately took position beside her. Not behind, not in front, but beside her as an equal. She pulled out her portable scanner and began running atmospheric checks while Shadow methodically investigated their surroundings. "You know, when I was selected for this mission, the committee thought I was crazy for insisting you come along," she said, keeping her voice conversational. She had learned long ago that talking to Shadow helped her think through complex problems. "They couldn't understand why I'd want to bring Earth's most feared predator to a diplomatic meeting." Shadow huffed softly, a sound she had come to recognize as his version of amusement. He had padded over to investigate something near the crystal lake, his movements fluid and purposeful. Elena watched him work, noting how he tested the air currents and examined the strange plant life with scientific curiosity rather than predatory intent. The truth was, Shadow represented everything that made humanity unique in the galaxy. Other species had intelligence, others had technology, and some even had stronger bonds with their companions. But humans had learned to form partnerships across species lines that went beyond simple domestication or symbiosis. They had created relationships based on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine affection. They're probably trying to figure out our power dynamic, Elena continued, speaking partly to Shadow and partly to their unseen observers. Most species they've encountered probably follow strict hierarchical structures: predator and prey, master and servant, strong and weak. Shadow had found something interesting near the water's edge, a cluster of crystalline formations that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. He approached cautiously, his enhanced senses analyzing potential threats, but when he determined they were harmless, he actually began to play with them. The massive predator batted gently at the crystals, watching them flash with different colors in response to his touch. Elena laughed, a sound that carried clearly in the thin air. "You're such a scientist, you know that? Can't resist investigating anything new." What their observers probably couldn't understand was that Shadow's curiosity was one of his most valuable traits. His enhanced genetics hadn't just created a more intelligent predator, they had created a being capable of scientific wonder. On their previous missions, Shadow had discovered everything from new mineral deposits to previously unknown forms of plant life, simply because he approached each new environment with genuine curiosity rather than fear or aggression. "Remember Kepler-3?" Elena asked, and Shadow's ears perked up at the familiar reference. "When we encountered those crystalline entities that the diplomatic corps couldn't figure out how to communicate with?" Shadow had been the one to crack that puzzle. While the human team had tried technological solutions and mathematical approaches, Shadow had simply observed the entities' movement patterns and realized they were trying to recreate a dance. His patient observation and willingness to participate in their cultural expressions had opened the first successful communication channel. The sound of approaching aircraft made both Elena and Shadow look up. 3 sleek vessels descended from the upper atmosphere, their designs unlike anything in Earth's databases. Each ship bore the distinctive markings of different Galactic Confederation member species, and Elena felt a familiar flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. "Showtime, partner," she said softly. "Remember what we practiced?" Shadow moved to stand beside her, his massive frame radiating calm confidence. This was another aspect of their partnership that Elena suspected would confuse their observers. Shadow wasn't positioned to defend her. He was positioned to support her. There was a crucial difference. As the alien vessels landed in designated areas around the meeting site, Elena checked her universal translator one final time. The device would handle the basic linguistic conversions, but successful first contact depended on so much more than just words. Body language, cultural cues, and unspoken assumptions could make or break these initial interactions. "They'll probably be afraid of you at first," Elena told Shadow, scratching behind his ears. "Most species haven't learned to differentiate between dangerous and hostile. But that's okay. We'll show them there's a difference." Shadow's response was to lean slightly against her leg, a gesture of support and partnership that had become second nature to both of them. Elena felt her confidence steady. Whatever happened in the next few hours, they would face it together. The first alien delegation emerged from their vessel, and Elena got her first close look at actual Galactic Confederation representatives. The lead figure appeared to be crystalline, refracting light in beautiful patterns, while the others showed the distinctive features she recognized from the preliminary briefings, one insectoid, one reptilian. They approached slowly, clearly uncertain about Shadow's presence. Elena could see the way their attention kept shifting between her and her companion, trying to assess the relationship dynamic. This was the crucial moment where first impressions would be formed. Elena stood slowly, keeping her movements calm and deliberate. Shadow rose with her, matching her pace perfectly. Together they took a few steps forward, closing half the distance between themselves and the alien delegation. "Greetings," Elena said clearly, her translator converting the words into the standard galactic language. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, representing Earth and humanity. This is Shadow, my partner and companion." She placed her hand gently on Shadow's head, and the massive wolf hybrid sat beside her with dignity that would have impressed any Earth diplomat. His golden eyes remained alert but non-threatening, studying their visitors with the same scientific curiosity he had shown toward the crystal formations. Ambassador Veltar had participated in first contact protocols with over 40 different species during her diplomatic career, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Standing 10 meters away from a human and her apex predator companion, she found herself questioning fundamental assumptions about intelligence, partnership, and the nature of civilization itself. "Dr. Vasquez," she said, her crystalline form adjusting its light patterns to convey formal respect. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Confederation Diplomatic Corps. These are my colleagues, Dr. Zixara of the Scientific Division and Commander Thalvek of Security." What struck her immediately was how the human's companion, Shadow, tracked each introduction with obvious intelligence. The creature's golden eyes moved from speaker to speaker, and Veltar could swear she saw comprehension there. Not just animal awareness, but actual understanding of the social dynamics at play. Dr. Zixara stepped forward, her compound eyes fixed on Shadow with scientific fascination. "Dr. Vasquez, our preliminary observations have raised several questions about your companion's status. Our databases classify this creature as a Class A apex predator, yet your interaction pattern suggests something far more complex." Elena smiled, and Veltar noticed how the expression seemed to relax Shadow as well. The massive predator's ears moved forward in what appeared to be a positive response to his partner's emotional state. "Shadow is indeed a predator by evolutionary design," Elena explained. "But on Earth we've learned that evolution's first draft isn't always the final answer. Shadow represents about 30 generations of selective enhancement, both genetic and educational. He's as much a scientist and explorer as I am." To demonstrate her point, Elena gestured toward the crystalline formations near the lake. "Shadow, show them what you discovered." The wolf hybrid rose smoothly and padded toward the bioluminescent crystals. But instead of the aggressive approach the aliens might have expected from a predator investigating unknown phenomena, Shadow moved with careful scientific methodology. He approached from downwind, tested the air for chemical signatures, and only when he was satisfied that the formations posed no danger did he begin his demonstration. Shadow gently touched one of the crystals with his nose, causing it to pulse with blue light. He then touched another with his paw, producing a different color and frequency. After a few moments of systematic testing, he had created a simple but unmistakable pattern, a sequence of colors that repeated in mathematical progression. "Remarkable," breathed Dr. Zixara. "He's demonstrating scientific methodology. Hypothesis, testing, pattern recognition." Commander Thalvek, whose scales had been steadily shifting toward nervous yellow since their arrival, finally spoke up. "But the physical capabilities we're observing, that creature could tear through our environmental suits without effort. How can you trust it so completely?" Elena's response was to walk over to where Shadow was continuing his investigation of the crystals. She knelt beside him, bringing her head level with his, and began examining the formations from his perspective. Shadow immediately adjusted his position to give her a better angle, then used his superior height to point out details she couldn't see from her lower vantage point. "Trust isn't something you can build through power or control," Elena explained as she worked alongside Shadow. "It comes from mutual respect, shared experiences, and the knowledge that your partner values your well-being as much as their own." Veltar found herself moving closer, drawn by the unusual dynamic she was witnessing. In Confederation space, partnerships between species were typically based on complementary needs. One species provided protection, while another offered technical expertise. Or one supplied resources while another provided processing capabilities. But this was different. "Dr. Vasquez," Veltar said carefully, "our understanding of interspecies relationships is based on clear hierarchical structures or symbiotic exchanges. What you're describing sounds almost like friendship." Elena looked up from the crystals, her face brightening. "Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Shadow and I chose to work together because we complement each other's abilities and because we genuinely enjoy each other's company." Shadow huffed softly, a sound that Elena clearly interpreted as agreement. He had discovered that the crystal formations responded to touch, pressure, and even breath temperature, creating a complex interactive system that none of their remote sensors had detected. Dr. Zixara was frantically taking notes on her portable scanner. "The implications are staggering. If humans have developed the ability to form genuine partnerships with apex predators, their potential for alliance building with sapient species could be unprecedented. But how do you resolve conflicts? Commander Tholvek asked, his security background making him focus on potential problems. When your interests diverge, who has final authority? Elena and Shadow exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes. Then Elena sat back on her heels and considered the question seriously. Conflicts do happen, she admitted. Last month, Shadow wanted to investigate what turned out to be a nest of extremely territorial crystalline entities on Kepler-4. My instruments suggested it was too dangerous. We had a disagreement. How was it resolved? Veltar asked, genuinely curious. We compromised. Shadow agreed to wait while I designed better protective equipment. And I agreed to let him lead the investigation once we had proper safety measures in place. His instincts were right. There was a new form of mineral intelligence there that we never would have discovered without his persistence. Shadow had moved on to investigating the alien technology, but he was doing so with obvious restraint. He sniffed at the air around Dr. Zixara's scanner but didn't attempt to touch it. When she noticed his interest, the insectoid scientist held the device lower so he could examine it more closely. Fascinating, Dr. Zixara murmured. He's showing scientific curiosity about our technology, but he's also respecting boundaries. The cognitive complexity required for that level of social awareness. Shadow understands consent, Elena explained. He's curious about everything. But he's also learned that investigation requires permission when it involves someone else's property or personal space. To everyone's surprise, Dr. Zixara extended her scanner toward Shadow. Would you like a closer look? Shadow looked to Elena, who nodded encouragingly. The massive predator then approached the scanner with delicate precision, examining it visually and olfactorily but never touching without clear permission. Commander Tholvek watched this interaction with growing amazement. The level of trust required for this dynamic. In my species, such vulnerability would be considered dangerous, even foolish. Elena stood and brushed crystal dust from her environmental suit. That's exactly why it works so well. Because the trust is mutual and voluntary, it's also incredibly strong. Shadow chooses to moderate his predatory instincts because he values our partnership. I choose to trust him with my life because I know he values my well-being. Veltar felt her understanding of human psychology shifting dramatically. The preliminary reports had painted humans as unpredictable and potentially dangerous, but what she was seeing suggested something far more nuanced. Humans appeared to be natural alliance builders, capable of forming bonds that transcended traditional power structures. Dr. Vasquez, she said slowly, I believe we may have significantly underestimated humanity's potential contribution to Confederation society. Elena smiled again, and Veltar noticed how Shadow's tail moved in what appeared to be a positive response. We're hoping you'll give us the chance to prove that assessment right. Shadow and I didn't come here just to demonstrate human-animal partnerships. We came to show you that humans understand cooperation on a fundamental level that might be useful in galactic diplomacy. As if to emphasize the point, Shadow had begun creating a more complex pattern with the crystal formations, incorporating elements from both human mathematical concepts and what appeared to be his own aesthetic preferences. The result was beautiful, logical, and completely unprecedented. The formal negotiations had moved to the human shuttle, where Elena had insisted on demonstrating Earth's hospitality protocols. Shadow lay comfortably near the entrance, positioned where he could monitor the surrounding area, while remaining part of the conversation. His relaxed posture had done much to ease the initial tension among the alien delegates. The Confederation Council will need concrete evidence of humanity's diplomatic capabilities, Ambassador Veltar explained, her crystalline form refracting the shuttle's interior lighting into dancing patterns. The partnership you've demonstrated with Shadow is impressive, but governing galactic affairs requires managing conflicts between dozens of species with vastly different needs and perspectives. Elena nodded thoughtfully while preparing what humans called coffee for herself and offering various compatible refreshments to her guests. Shadow raised his head at the familiar scent, and Elena automatically prepared a small portion of the enhanced protein supplements he preferred. That's exactly why we requested this meeting format, Elena replied. Shadow and I have been working together for 8 years, and we've encountered nearly every type of conflict resolution challenge you could imagine. Dr. Zixara, who had been quietly scanning Shadow with her instruments, looked up with obvious excitement. Dr. Vasquez, these readings are extraordinary. Your companion's neural activity suggests he's following our conversation in remarkable detail. Is he actually comprehending the political implications we're discussing? Elena glanced at Shadow, who had turned his attention toward the scientist with unmistakable interest. Shadow, she's asking if you understand what we're talking about. Want to show them? The massive wolf hybrid rose and approached the central display console Elena had been using to show star charts. With careful precision, he used his nose to activate the holographic interface. The display shifted to show the local galactic sector, highlighting the various Confederation member worlds. Shadow studied the display for a moment, then began indicating specific systems with gentle touches of his paw. First, he highlighted the Zephyrian trade routes, then the disputed border regions between the Crystalline Consortium and the Insectoid collectives. He's identifying the major political hotspots, Commander Tholvek said, his scales shifting to an impressed blue-green. But how could he possibly know about interstellar politics? Elena smiled proudly. Shadow has been present during every mission briefing, every diplomatic consultation, and every strategic planning session we've conducted for the past 3 years. He may not speak galactic standard, but he understands far more than most people assume. To prove her point, Elena activated a different section of the display, showing resource distribution charts. Shadow, show them the problem with the outer rim mining rights. Shadow immediately began manipulating the display, highlighting how the current mining agreements created unsustainable resource flows that disadvantaged 3 different species simultaneously. His analysis was sophisticated, showing not just the immediate economic impacts but the long-term strategic vulnerabilities the situation created. Incredible, breathed Ambassador Veltar. He's not just following the conversation, he's contributing to it. Elena leaned back in her chair, watching her partner work with obvious pride. This is what I mean about human diplomatic potential. We don't just manage conflicts. We form genuine partnerships that make everyone stronger. Dr. Zixara was frantically taking notes. But surely there are limits to this cooperative approach. What happens when you encounter truly hostile species? Beings who see cooperation as weakness to be exploited? The question clearly struck a nerve. Because Shadow's ears flattened slightly and he moved closer to Elena. Elena's expression grew more serious as well. We encountered that exact situation 6 months ago, Elena said quietly. A species called the Devourers had been systematically destroying research stations in the Andromeda approach. They viewed any attempt at communication as an admission of inferiority. Commander Tholvek leaned forward with professional interest. How did you resolve that situation? Our reports indicated the Devourers were completely unresponsive to diplomatic overtures. Elena and Shadow exchanged one of their meaningful looks. Shadow figured out something our analysts had missed. The Devourers weren't attacking because they were hostile. They were attacking because they were terrified. She activated another section of the display, showing the Andromeda approach region. The research stations were all built near the gravitational anomalies the Devourers use for reproduction. From their perspective, we weren't just encroaching on their territory. We were threatening their ability to continue their species. Shadow approached the display again and began indicating the patrol patterns the Devourers had established. His reconstruction showed how each attack had been carefully calculated to drive researchers away from specific areas without actually maximizing casualties. Once we understood their real motivation, Elena continued, we were able to negotiate a solution. The research stations were relocated to areas that didn't interfere with Devourer reproduction cycles, and in exchange, they agreed to serve as early warning systems for the gravitational storms that had been destroying human shipping in that sector. Ambassador Veltar's form brightened with astonishment. You turned a hostile species into allies by understanding their underlying needs, rather than just responding to their hostile actions. Shadow was the one who recognized the pattern, Elena said, reaching over to scratch behind her partner's ears. Human analysts were focused on the tactical aspects of the attacks, but Shadow noticed the behavioral patterns that indicated protective, rather than aggressive motivation. Dr. Zixara set down her scanner entirely, her compound eyes fixed on Shadow with newfound respect. Your companion identified behavioral motivations that our entire analytical department missed. The strategic implications are staggering. Elena nodded seriously. This is what we're trying to show you. Human diplomatic strength doesn't come from superior technology or military power. It comes from our ability to form partnerships that help us see problems from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Commander Thalvek had been quiet for several minutes, clearly processing what he'd witnessed. Finally, he spoke up. Dr. Vasquez, I must ask directly. How can the Confederation be certain that humans won't simply form alliances that serve their own interests at the expense of existing member species? Elena considered the question carefully while Shadow returned to his position near the entrance. That's a fair concern, Commander. But I think you're still thinking about this in terms of traditional power dynamics. She gestured toward Shadow, who was now calmly monitoring the external environment while remaining attentive to the conversation. My partnership with Shadow doesn't work because one of us controls the other. It works because we both benefit from each other's strengths, and we both take responsibility for each other's well-being. When Shadow succeeded in establishing communication with the crystalline entities on Kepler-3, that wasn't a victory for him or for me individually. It was a victory for our partnership, which meant it was a victory for both of us equally. Ambassador, Veltar was beginning to understand the profound difference between human alliance building and the hierarchical relationships that dominated Confederation politics. You're suggesting that humans approach interspecies cooperation as an opportunity for mutual enhancement rather than competitive advantage. Exactly, Elena confirmed. We don't want to join the Confederation to gain power over other species. We want to join because we believe our partnership-building abilities could help solve problems that have been frustrating galactic civilization for centuries. Shadow suddenly raised his head, his enhanced senses detecting something the others had missed. A moment later, Elena's communication console chimed with an incoming message from the research station above. Elena sealed her emergency EVA suit and checked the medical supplies she had hastily gathered from the shuttle's emergency stores. Through the viewport, she could see the refugee ship Seeker struggling to maintain attitude control, its hull scarred by what appeared to be weapons damage from some distant conflict. Shadow has established direct data link with the lead Devourer ship, Ambassador Veltar reported, her voice filled with amazement. He's coordinating a joint rescue operation using protocols I've never seen before. Elena watched through the shuttle's cameras as Shadow somehow managed to interface with both human and Devourer communication systems simultaneously. The massive Wolf hybrid's enhanced neural architecture was processing data streams that would have required a full diplomatic team under normal circumstances. Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Zixara said, monitoring the complex coordination. Your partner is essentially conducting three-way real-time translation between species that have completely different communication paradigms. The cognitive load should be impossible for any single consciousness. Elena smiled with pride even as she prepared for the dangerous EVA transfer. Shadow's been training for exactly this kind of situation his entire life. He understands that successful partnerships require the ability to bridge communication gaps under pressure. The shuttle's maneuvering thrusters fired as Shadow brought them into precise alignment with the refugee ship's emergency airlock. His piloting was smooth and confident, compensating for both the damaged ship's erratic movement and the gravitational effects from the nearby moon. Transfer window opening in 30 seconds, Shadow's status display indicated. Elena had learned to read his operational communications through the interface system they had developed over years of partnership. Elena, Ambassador Veltar said urgently, I need to ask, if this rescue succeeds, what will you expect from the Confederation in return? What does humanity want as compensation for this intervention? Elena paused in her final preparations, struck by the question's implications. Ambassador, we're not doing this for compensation. We're doing it because those people need help, and we're in a position to provide it. Commander Thalvek's scales shifted to confused patterns. But surely there must be some strategic advantage you're seeking. Resources, territory, trade agreements? Elena shook her head as she moved to the airlock. The advantage we get is the same advantage Shadow and I get from our partnership. Everyone becomes stronger when we work together successfully. She activated the emergency transfer system, propelling herself across the gap between ships while Shadow maintained perfect positioning, despite the complex gravitational and propulsion forces involved. The refugee ship's airlock cycled, and Elena found herself face to face with beings she had never encountered before. The Wanderers were tall, ethereal creatures with translucent skin that showed complex circulatory systems beneath. Their large eyes conveyed intelligence and desperate hope as Elena quickly assessed their medical situation. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez," she said, her universal translator working to convert her words into their language. "I'm here to help stabilize your life support until we can get you to proper medical facilities." The lead Wanderer, whose skin patterns indicated advanced age and leadership status, approached her with obvious effort. "Dr. Vasquez, I am Elder Mistwalker. We are grateful, but we cannot pay for assistance. We lost everything in the Helix evacuation." Elena was already working on their failing atmospheric processors, applying human engineering techniques to alien technology with practiced efficiency. "Payment isn't required, Elder. This is what civilized species do for each other." Through her communication link, she could hear Shadow coordinating with both the Confederation station and the Devourer escorts. His analysis had determined that the station's medical bay could accommodate Wanderer physiology, but the transfer would require cooperation from all three species present. "Elena," Ambassador Veltar's voice came through clearly. "Shadow is proposing something unprecedented. He wants to bring one of the Devourer ships to the station as part of the rescue operation." Elena paused in her work on the life support systems. What's his reasoning? According to his analysis, the Wanderers have been traumatized by their recent experiences. The Devourers have been protecting them for 3 days, and separating them now could cause additional psychological damage. He's suggesting the Devourers be allowed to remain nearby during the medical treatment process. Elder Mistwalker's skin patterns shifted to what Elena recognized as surprise and hope. "The Great Hunters wish to remain with us? Even in your protected station?" Elena smiled as she completed the atmospheric processor repairs. "Shadow understands that successful rescue operations aren't just about medical treatment. They're about preserving the social bonds that help people recover from trauma. The improvements to the life support systems bought them precious time, but the Wanderers still needed immediate medical attention that only the station could provide." Elena began preparing them for evacuation, while Shadow coordinated the most complex interspecies operation in recorded Confederation history. Dr. Vasquez came, Shadow's communication through the ship's systems. "Devourer leader requests permission to speak with you directly." Elena activated her suit's communication array. "This is Dr. Vasquez. Go ahead." The harmonic patterns that emerged from her communicator were unlike anything she had heard before. Complex, layered, and somehow conveying deep emotion despite the alien nature of the sounds. "Small pack leader who heals," her translator interpreted. "Your hunting companion shows wisdom patterns we had not observed in other species. The lost ones have bonded with our protection pack. Separation now would cause spirit damage." Elena felt a surge of understanding. The Devourers weren't just providing escort. They had formed temporary pack bonds with the refugees. Breaking those bonds abruptly could be psychologically devastating for both species. "I understand," Elena replied. "Can your ships dock safely with our station's facilities?" "Your wolf companion has already provided adaptation protocols. His mind patterns include structural specifications that make peaceful docking possible." Elena shook her head in amazement. Even while coordinating the rescue operation, Shadow had been analyzing the engineering requirements for allowing Devourer ships to dock safely with Confederation technology. "Elder Mistwalker," Elena said, turning to the Wanderer leader, "we're going to evacuate you to our medical station, and your Devourer protectors are going to stay with you during the treatment process. Will that be acceptable?" The Elder's skin patterns shifted through what Elena was learning to recognize as profound gratitude. "Dr. Vasquez, in all our travels through the galaxy, we have never encountered such kindness between different peoples." Elena began helping the Wanderers into emergency transfer pods while Shadow continued coordinating the unprecedented three-way cooperation. "Elder, this is what the galaxy could be like if we all learned to work together instead of fighting each other." As the first evacuation pod launched toward the Confederation station, Elena realized that what had started as a simple first contact meeting was becoming a demonstration of humanity's greatest strength. Their ability to build bridges between species that had never imagined cooperation was possible. 3 weeks later, The observation deck of Kepler-7 station presented a sight that would have been unimaginable before the rescue operation. Devourer ships maintained protective positions around the station, while Wanderer refugees worked alongside Confederation medical staff in the recovery wings. What had started as an emergency had evolved into the galaxy's first successful tri-species cooperation protocol. Elena stood beside Shadow at the main viewport, watching as a Devourer engineer worked with Dr. Zixara to modify life support systems for long-term Wanderer habitation. The massive predator that had once terrified the Confederation, delegates now served as an informal translator and coordinator between all three species. The Council's preliminary report came through this morning, Ambassador Veltar announced as she approached them. Her crystalline form had taken on brighter, more optimistic light patterns since the crisis resolution. They're recommending immediate fast-track consideration for human membership in the Confederation. Elena smiled but kept her attention focused on Shadow, who was monitoring multiple communication streams from their various new allies. What changed their minds? According to the report, it was the partnership paradigm you demonstrated. The Council has been trying to resolve the Wanderer refugee crisis for months, but every proposed solution involved traditional hierarchical assistance programs. No one considered that the solution might require voluntary cooperation between species with completely different social structures. Commander Thalvek joined them at the viewport, his scales now displaying the confident blue-green patterns that indicated professional satisfaction. Dr. Vasquez, I owe you an apology. My security background made me assume that strength came from the ability to control dangerous elements. You've shown us that true strength comes from the ability to form voluntary alliances with dangerous elements. Elena reached over to scratch behind Shadow's ears, a gesture that had become automatic over their years together. Shadow's the one who figured out the key insight. He realized that the Devourers and Wanderers had already formed a functional alliance based on mutual benefit. Our role wasn't to manage them, it was to extend that alliance to include us. Dr. Zixara approached from the engineering section, her compound eyes bright with excitement. Dr. Vasquez, the applications for your partnership model are extraordinary. We've identified at least 12 ongoing Confederation disputes that could potentially be resolved using similar approaches. Shadow lifted his head and made a soft sound that Elena immediately recognized as interest. Over the past 3 weeks, he had become fascinated by the mathematical patterns underlying interspecies conflict resolution. Shadow wants to see the analysis, Elena translated. He's been developing what I can only describe as a predictive model for successful alliance formation. Ambassador Veltar's form brightened with surprise. Your companion is conducting theoretical research in diplomatic science? Elena activated the nearby display console, and Shadow immediately began manipulating the interface. His analysis showed complex relationship maps between different Confederation species, highlighting potential compatibility factors that traditional diplomatic analysis had missed. He's identified 17 different species pairs that show high probability for successful partnership protocols. Elena explained as Shadow continued his demonstration. But more importantly, he's found 3 different conflict zones where partnership interventions could prevent potential wars. The implications were staggering. Shadow's analysis suggested that many of the Confederation's ongoing diplomatic challenges could be resolved not through traditional negotiation or power balancing, but through carefully facilitated partnership formation. Dr. Vasquez, Ambassador Veltar said carefully, the Council is prepared to offer humanity full membership status immediately, but they have one specific request. Elena looked up from Shadow's analysis with curiosity. Oh, what kind of request? They want you and Shadow to head a new diplomatic innovation division. Your mission would be to develop and implement partnership-based solutions for conflicts that have resisted traditional resolution methods. Elena felt a surge of excitement, but she also knew that such a decision couldn't be made unilaterally. She looked at Shadow, who had paused his analysis to focus on the conversation. Shadow, you understand what they're asking? It would mean permanent assignment to Confederation space, working with species we've never encountered before, dealing with conflicts that could affect millions of lives. The massive wolf hybrid's response was to return to his analysis, but this time he began highlighting specific conflict zones and showing projected outcomes for partnership interventions. His message was clear. He saw this as an opportunity to apply everything they had learned together on a galactic scale. "There's one more thing," Ambassador Veltar added. "The Devourers have requested that any new diplomatic protocols include provisions for what they call pack bonding across species lines. They want to formalize the protection relationships they've been developing with refugee populations." Elena laughed with genuine delight. They want to turn their temporary alliances into permanent partnerships. Commander Tholvik nodded, his scales showing patterns Elena was learning to associate with approved amazement. According to their representatives, working with humans and wanderers has given them new purposes beyond simple territorial protection. They're interested in becoming what they call guardians of the vulnerable throughout Confederation space. Shadow completed his analysis and stepped back from the console. The display now showed a comprehensive model for what he apparently thought of as galactic partnership networks, complex webs of voluntary alliances that could provide stability and mutual benefit across dozens of species. "Elder Mistwalker wanted me to give you this," Dr. Zixara said, approaching with a small crystalline device. "It's a Wanderer memory crystal containing their complete historical archives. They said it's a gift for the species that taught them that refugees could become partners instead of burdens." Elena accepted the crystal with appropriate reverence, understanding the significance of such a gift. Wanderer memory crystals were legendary for their information storage capacity and were considered priceless cultural artifacts. "Dr. Vasquez," Ambassador Veltar said formally, "I'm authorized to ask for your official response to the Council's offer. Will you and Shadow accept leadership of the Diplomatic Innovation Division?" Elena looked around the observation deck, taking in the unprecedented sight of 3 formerly incompatible species working together in harmony. Shadow moved to stand beside her, his golden eyes reflecting the same sense of possibility she felt. "Ambassador," Elena said with a smile that conveyed years of partnership experience, "Shadow and I came here to show you what humans could contribute to galactic civilization. If you're willing to give us the chance to prove that partnerships can solve problems that force and negotiation can't, then yes, we accept." Shadow's response was a soft sound that Dr. Zixara's instruments registered as contentment mixed with anticipation. The massive predator that had once been seen as a threat to diplomatic protocols had become the galaxy's most effective partnership coordinator. As the various species representatives began planning their new cooperative frameworks, Elena realized that their simple demonstration of human-animal partnership had accidentally started a revolution in galactic diplomacy. The galaxy was about to discover that the strongest bonds weren't forged through conquest or treaty, but through the kind of mutual respect and voluntary cooperation that she and Shadow had been demonstrating all along. Looking out at the stars, Elena could envision a future where conflicts were resolved not through force or complex negotiations, but through the patient work of building understanding between beings who had never imagined they could be allies. It was exactly the kind of future that made all their years of partnership worthwhile.